Let's bring in our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, who's got more details for us. Adam, what do we know?
Well, Jean-Marie Le Pen was 96 years old, and was one of the most controversial and divisive figures in the long history of modern French politics. It is understood that he has died in France. Of course, his daughter Marine Le Pen, who has carried the family name right to the forefront of modern French politics, is believed to have been in Mayotte, which was, of course, hit by that devastating weather over the festive period. She was certainly there recently. We believe she may now be on her way back to France. And I think it's going to be very hard to overstate just the role that Jean-Marie Le Pen has played in French political life over many decades. This is a man who stood for president 5 times, never won the presidency, but once in 2002 got to a runoff with Jacques Chirac. And that was the high watermark of his political career, but was also a sort of devastating rebuke, because when he got to that runoff, pretty much the entire French political establishment coalesced to oppose him, and he was humiliated, with Chirac winning over 80% of the vote and Le Pen left a very, very distant loser. But what he did was to create the Front National, the National Front, a right wing, a strong, extreme right-wing party in times, moulded in his image. Jean-Marie Le Pen really spent much of his political life hating migrants and hating Muslims, and particularly hating migrants who were also Muslims. He was also stridently opposed to extending gay rights. He was socially conservative. He was somebody who had on occasion appeared to trivialize the Holocaust, describing it once as a mere detail. He was found guilty of inciting hatred and violence. And yet at the same time, this was a man who brought the National Front into the very forefront of people's political consciousness in France. Now, what happened then was that he was eventually usurped as its leader by his own daughter, Marine, who realized that the Front National was too tainted by both that name and by the presence of her father, and it was her, Marine, who eventually effectively threw him out of the party and renamed it. It's now called the National Rally, the Rassemblement National. And under her leadership, the party has become a little more mainstream and a lot more popular. Jean-Marie has existed more and more on the sidelines, and yet he has remained strident and entirely unapologetic. He was the lightning rod for far-right politics, and it was he who really brought that far-right anti-migrant rhetoric from the extremes and back towards the mainstream, from where it has been brought into that very heartland of French politics by his daughter, Marine. So his own father died when he was young in a boat explosion. Jean-Marie Le Pen, his political thoughts were really shaped, I think, by his time in the military when he served in Algeria. And that was what appeared to propel him towards a brand of far-right politics. He has been unwell for a time. He has lived his life in a vast house on the edge of Paris that was given to him as a donation by a very wealthy admirer. He has, of course, never been any friend of a succession of prime ministers and presidents who he has derided as being effectively from the melange of centrist politicians, the likes of Emmanuel Macron, absolute anathema to everything that Jean-Marie Le Pen believed in. In the end, he ran out of political friends, including his own daughter, ostracizing him, and yet he will be remembered as somebody who took extreme opinions and brought them into the heart of French politics.
And just looking, Adam, at French media reports, and that's the phrase that Le Monde is using, putting the far right at the heart of French politics. But it's hard, is it not, to almost overstate just how extreme his views were at times. Reading that in 2014, he suggested that Ebola was a potential solution to Europe's immigration crisis. That was just before he was re-elected to the European Parliament. The year later, saying that the Holocaust was a detail of history, and that then triggered the row, as you said, with his daughter and the extraordinary party congress that followed, that ultimately saw him being expelled from that party. But he did put those views at the very centre of French society, and many people at the time joined him in those views, or certainly joined him in some of the elements of politics that he was espousing. But now, in the years that have followed, under this rebranded and slightly more muted form of the party, they still continue to see success.